Hi everybody, I think there's a trickle of people coming in and stop now, so I'm going to make a start. I'm Hannah Mudge. I'm here to talk to you today about email engagement, and I'm doing this in my capacity as somebody who works in the charity sector, in fundraising and communications. I work for the Leprosy Mission England and Wales. I've been there for 6 years. Working in comms and fundraising as we've moved really into digital and been on a really big journey over the last few years, which I will be talking to you a bit about over the course of the session. But to start with, I just want to get you to have a think for a minute about something and to have a think about the sort of emails that actually make you sit up and take notice. So just think for a sec about the most memorable email you've received recently. What was it, and why was it so memorable? And things that might have popped into your head, something really exciting, an exciting email, a big campaign that you might have signed up to or been involved in, a special message from somebody important to you, or even something that's a big problem or something that's gone wrong. And these are all the reasons that things catch our eye. And I've done this as an exercise before in a different session, and the thing that most came to my mind at the time was when I'd booked a work trip back a while ago. I was going abroad for work, and about a week before, I received an email from the airline, a well-known airline, saying, "Mrs. Mudge, your trip to Moscow next week," which was all well and good, but I was going to Greece. And there was that moment of panic of what have I done? Have I spent a lot of money booking flights to somewhere I don't need to go to? And of course, about an hour later, I got an oops email from the airline. "Oh, we're really sorry that this may have caused an issue. You're not going to Moscow, it's all fine." But it just shows sometimes that the emails that stand out to us, they are for a variety of reasons, and we'll come on to oops emails a bit later on. I think one of the crucial things these days is that we need to stand out among such a massive overload of emails in our inbox. Do you read every email that you receive? Because I certainly don't. There's a lot of select all and delete goes on in my inbox, usually of marketing emails. People are much more aware now of what they want and don't want to receive, and of course now they must be given opportunities to explicitly opt in and out of receiving things, so people have got increasingly more savvy. And with this overload of emails in our inbox, it's not always likely that people are going to read what you put out there. So what we're all about today is making emails that people will want to read. And it's not something that you have to start out as an expert to be able to do. Some of the science around things that people are likely to respond to, it seems quite complex. But I actually started out training as a journalist, and I worked in publishing. And when I moved into the charity sector and started working in fundraising, email communication, you think you can do writing, you've been trained to do writing. It's actually a completely different ballgame, and had to go in as a complete beginner. But what I just wanted to encourage people with was that if you do feel like a real novice with things, there is the opportunity to learn, and there's so much out there that can help us learn in that respect. I've done training to help me, get there in terms of emails and to understand more about the theory behind emails, and it might be something that you wanted to look into as well. So I'm just going to take us on a bit of a journey about my organisation, Leprosy Mission England and Wales, or TLMEW, the mouthful that we often call ourselves. What was going on with us when we first started sending out emails, and how's that evolved and why? Well, when I joined the organisation, we'd been sending out a quarterly e-newsletter since 2009, initially to about 3,000 people, because those were the people who supported us and we had their email addresses. And that had risen by 2012 to sending things to about 6,000 people, which is, not too bad. It's okay. And we were supplementing that with the occasional sort of advocacy and campaign email. We're not a campaigning organisation, so we don't get many opportunities to do that sort of thing. So email was functioning mainly to communicate news to people, news, events, that sort of thing. 2009 is obviously a really, really long time ago in digital. And you will see that when I go on to the next slide, it's the way we were. These are 2 screenshots of our e-newsletters from the past. And what's immediately noticeable when we look at these now is that they're really functioning as a what's on kind of email and less of a way for us to communicate with people about their involvement with us as an organisation. And one of the key things that has evolved in terms of how charities are communicating with people now is really linking up the donor with how they are helping the people that their money is going to help, the money that their people's going to. But when you look at this, what you'll see is that the thought process when it came to creating these emails was probably, oh, it's time for the spring e-newsletter. What are we going to put in it? Oh, look, here's some events that are happening. Let's tell people about some volunteering opportunities. Here's some info about a fundraising trek. And a major problem when you look at it is that we're a charity, but we're not telling our supporters anything about the people that they're actually helping. Where are the people who are being helped? The people affected by leprosy in this picture, there's kind of a few small pictures of them, but we're not telling people anything about them. What you're seeing is a lot of requests, a lot of links, a lot of things to click. Not very focused, there's too many calls to action, too many different elements, no compelling photography. And so what you end up with is a really kind of confused email that you're not sure many people are going to engage effectively with. They're going to see a huge menu of things to do. They're going to see that they're being asked to do a lot of different things, and it's going to put them off. So what we ended up doing as an organisation was going through a real process of reassessing how we were communicating with people. And since then, things have changed so much. And the first step was actually to send out our first appeal by email. That was something we'd never done before. Happened for the first time in the summer of 2012, and focusing on a food crisis that was happening in Niger at the time. Niger is one of 11 countries that we currently work in. And so for the very first time, we were using urgent messaging, a call to action button saying donate now, and telling our supporters it was imperative that they act. And sometimes these things might seem a bit obvious, like, a strong call to action button. But that was really new for us at the time. And obviously, it was urgent because it was an emergency appeal, but there's no reason why you can't create a sense of urgency in non-emergency communications the rest of the time. Normally when you're emailing people, it's because you want them to do something, you want them to sign up to something, respond to something, give you some information. There's no reason that you can't create a sense of urgency in that. And this was a huge departure from what we'd sent to people in the past, so there was quite a bit of apprehension about it, I think. How are people going to respond to this? Are they going to be upset that we've sent them something which seems so different, so urgent? The good news was the response was actually amazing, and it just shows that if you don't ask for things to communicate with people in a certain way, you don't get much from them in return. And so instead of confusing people and giving them a lot of options, too many things to click, they've got one button there, one thing that they need to do. It's an urgent need. They can see what the urgent need is. It's talking about one specific thing. And so they responded. And online donations that year were 2.3% of our total income as an organisation, which, you think, oh, that's really tiny. But we were just starting out, and it was a really, really good start. And so from then on, we were kind of on a journey, trying to hone absolutely everything, realising that what we'd been doing in the past with e-news was not good. and that we needed to move on. And so everything was revamped. Sometimes e-news gets a bit of a bad rap, it's like lots of things to click, lots of things to look at, it's confusing. But this is the way that lots of organisations still need to communicate, and churches as well. As a church, you will need to send out a sort of newsletter type email that has several different things that you want to tell people. And so it's not inherently bad, it's about making it better. And so we really simplified everything. It's a simpler template, it looks nicer. There's 2 buttons instead of about 10 different links to click. And for the first time, we were actually focusing on the people that we help as an organisation, which may not seem that radical, but I think it really was at the time. The new focus on beneficiaries, making them, centre of everything that we do, instead of here's a thing that we're doing, here's another thing that we're doing. It's like, look, here's this person who you have helped by what you've done. And of course, the design helps with everything, really. The more white space, fewer items, it's just a lot more clean. And I think one of the key things to say about e-newsletters here is that you don't need to feel you need to scrabble around for umpteen things to put in one. If it does seem like a light week or a light month and there's not too many things to tell people, that's absolutely okay. Your email can focus on one main thing, and that's absolutely fine. There doesn't need to be a menu of content. But we weren't going to stop there. Obviously, we'd changed things. Things were going well, but we really wanted to look into how we could hone our email communications and make them a lot better. Things that we'd never done before was actually looking at how we communicate with our donors according to how they respond, testing different things, looking at the way people interact with things and tailoring what we do accordingly. And that is so key for the way we communicate with people through email. We'd never looked at our donors and how they interacted with us, never tested. So it was time to start testing, and that's the key way that you find out how your audiences are responding to things and how you need to tailor what you're doing as a result. And it's really important because what works for one organisation or church or business isn't going to work for another. It's all dependent on your subscribers, the demographic, the relationship they have with you. So although there's some principles that are true across the board, like always using simple language, using a simple template, for example, there's a lot of other things as well which will really be variable. I work in international development, so it's a really jargony sector, so stripping out all the complex language and acronyms and things, moving away from a really formal way of communicating was something that we've been doing over the years, moving to a more friendly and chatty way of talking to people via email. And I think that's generally true for all audiences, but there's some things that you want to test to make sure that you're doing the right thing by your audience. And it's a really good thing that testing, A/B tests have been made so simple now with the platforms that we're using, MailChimp, some of the bigger ones. So we use a platform as an organisation called Engaging Networks, which is a pretty big one. And all of these now, they make it very easy to set up a test. So you're sending one email to one group of people and one email to another, and you can compare the results against each other and see which one has performed best. So the first thing that we did was to test the existing magazine-style email that you just saw with the usual subject line, with a different email, so for Group B, of our supporters, which was just about one story, just a very simple template, no different things to click, no different things to look at, and just making the subject line really urgent and really trying to make them want to click through. And I don't know if you've guessed, but it was Group B that performed better. So the next thing that we were going to do was totally move away from what we were doing, which was sent to Group A. If your system the system you use for emails doesn't run A/B tests, you can do it. You can set it up yourself. You know, you can send an email to half your subscribers and send an email to the other half. You can work with what you've got and then just compare the results. So what we've ended up doing was simplifying from that one over there to that one there on the right, which is how we've kept our emails to this day, about 4 years later, because it works. It is very simple and straightforward, but people respond really well to it. So when we send out our e-news, which is quarterly, and then sometimes at other times for if there's something special happening, we split it down. So whereas our supporters who get direct mail get a magazine with lots of different things in it, we split the content down into 3 emails, kind of the 3 biggest or most important things that were in that magazine go down into 3 emails sent over 3 weeks. There's no need to have a complex template, and thankfully as well, like whatever you want to do with your templates, again, the platforms that we use make it really simple now to design stuff that looks good. I mean, we literally have our logo at the top, and then the unsubscribe blurb at the bottom, and then usually an image as well, and buttons if we've got call to action buttons. And we haven't felt that we've really needed anything else because it works absolutely fine. And of course, it is really important now that your templates work across all devices, but that is, again, so easy to do nowadays. When we last redesigned our website, which was in 2013, it was quite a new thing that stuff was being optimized for mobile, and thankfully now most stuff is, because as you know, there's nothing more off-putting than trying to do something on a phone when the website you're using is not optimized, and you end up trying to find buttons and minimize things and change the size of the page. Thankfully, we don't have to deal with that too much anymore. So, as a process of simplifying what we were doing with e-news, there were kind of some easy tips, really, that will really make a difference with what you're doing. I've talked about the engaging subject line before, and I'll go on to talk about how we've tested a bit with that in a minute, but that is so important. The other thing with emails is just making them as concise as possible. In direct mail, in magazines, you can afford to use a bit more in terms of words. But the whole point with email is using your short words, your short sentences, getting to the point, and being quite chatty in terms of the language you're using. I think as an organisation a few years ago, we tended to default to this very, very formal language, which is not how people talk, and it doesn't really encourage people to read emails. So important to pick one key subject in an email, so you're not asking people to do lots of different things. Talked about the templates a bit already, not confusing people by giving them, different buttons to go off to different destinations if you don't need to. And there's something which is so important here as the final point, is making your sender a real person, and this is for several reasons. So firstly, when you've got your kind of email addresses, which are info at and those sorts of things, it's not personal. It doesn't link the people who are getting your emails up with a real person. It makes them feel like they are being mailed by, a faceless sort of organisation. There's not a person that they're connected up with. So it's about building personal relationship. It also doesn't help in terms of messages going to spam when they're not from a real person. And it's helpful as well to put the name of your organisation or your church in the emails you're sending out. This will be different across different demographics, but so our key supporters as an organisation are often quite elderly. They are mostly over 70, definitely mostly over 60. And one thing that we find with our supporters is that they are often quite wary of things that are happening online, and they really want to feel that they can trust what they're getting from us, and they want to be able to trust that when they click a link, it's not going to take them to something terrible. They trust that when they open one of our emails, that it's from us and not spam or something that's going to have a virus in it. And we got an interesting piece of feedback. We'd always had our main emails coming from our national director, our main appeal emails, and our national director changed a couple of years ago. And when the new guy came in, I changed the who the emails were from. And it used to say, name of previous national director at the leprosy mission in the from bit of your email. And I forgot to put back in the at the leprosy mission. It was just his name. And we did get feedback from a couple of supporters that they had been wary of opening the email because they hadn't seen the leprosy mission when it popped into their inbox, and they wondered who this person was. So it is always worth making it really clear who it's from, but also it being a real person as well. And don't feel that you have to then, therefore, be sending from, an account that you don't necessarily want loads of replies coming into. If you want to redirect to a more generic inbox, then that's obviously absolutely fine. A couple of other bits, actually, that I'll mention here. About sending people files and links. Again, in terms of spam, it's not great to put attachments onto emails. So, if you can send people to a file destination, which is a link, from a button or whatever, instead of attaching it, that is really, really helpful. So I mentioned that we did some testing of language with subject lines. Testing subject lines is just so important, you really can't do enough of it, really. And what we really wanted to know was obviously what motivated our supporters to open emails. People's interest is piqued if they feel like they're being personally addressed. So, you can make it timely, you can ask a question, you can use people's name if you've got their name. Use you and your, creating intimacy, using I. And when we tested this, we had this appeal where we did the subject line of, I want to cure a child of leprosy versus cure a child of leprosy for just £24. And you might think that the amount would pique their interest, but it was actually the personal statement there, the I want to cure a child of leprosy, that encouraged people to open it. We do something where we also send an email to people who get post from us, just letting them know what we're sending them and that we've got campaigns coming up. And what we started to realize was that sending people an email to tell them we were sending them something in the post was actually really effective and helped people to respond to us. And so again, we did a test of an email subject line, which was, I just sent you something, versus cure a child of leprosy. And cure a child of leprosy is a good subject line. It is direct, it's short, it's to the point, but again, it was the personal one, the I just sent you something, that worked. I think the thing to always remember is resisting the temptation to make stuff about you, your organisation, to always be saying we, us, to think about using you and your a little bit more. And we tested lots of other things as well, and these are all examples of why testing is so important, because different audiences will respond in different ways. So we tested giving people the chance to give follow-up care for people with leprosy versus curing them, because we'd always had it in our minds that people wanted to cure people. But what we actually found out was that people responded better to wanting to give money towards long-term care for people with more complex disabilities. We tested using more urgent language, which had a kind of more activism feel to it, versus the softer, gentler language. And it was the urgent language that got the response. We've tested beginning emails, beginning news and things with an appropriate Bible verse. And strangely, as a Christian organisation, with nearly all of our supporters being Christians, they responded better to the one without the Bible verse. You just never know what's going to happen, do you? That doesn't mean we have taken Bible verses out of our communications, by the way. It was just interesting to see. Whether we put the call to action, donate now, click here, sign up here, on a button versus just as a link, the button performs better every time. It's just more prominent. Our buttons are usually pink or red. They stand out on the white background, don't they? Putting additional content in, like linking to videos, linking to blog posts, social media, is kind of getting people interested in things. And we found that works really well. And we tried a welcome series as well for new supporters. And what a welcome series is when somebody signs up to get emails from us, or when they make a donation for the first time, it's sending them a short series of emails, not all in one go, over the course of a few weeks, which introduces them to us as an organisation, helps them know what we're about, what our values are, introducing them to some of the work that we do. And that is just so important. There's a lot of research being done around when people sign up to get emails from organisations, what happens when they don't get very much straight off. And people lose interest. People actually want to receive things from you. And when they're signing up for the first time to get things from you, it doesn't mean they want to go on a mailing list and sort of occasionally receive something several months down the line. It means that they want to start engaging with you and learning things. And so that's where things like a welcome series can come in really handy and start to get people interested in you or on board with you, and how they could get involved, whether that's volunteering or coming along to an event, donating. And you can use a welcome series type thing as quite a soft way of communicating as well. You don't want to be in their face about all the things that they can do. It's very much about getting them on board with you. You hear so much about segmentation these days, and that is for a really good reason. It's that because people want to feel as if you've taken their personal preferences into account when you're communicating with them, and they're not just another name on a list of thousands of email addresses who are all being communicated with in the same way. And so I've talked briefly just now about what we often call onboarding for new sign-ups, which you can do through setting up, in most platforms now, what are often known as marketing automations. And they're a really good way of finding out what people would like to receive from you, because you can see which emails people have responded well to, and you can give them options as well of what they might like to receive from you in return. You can set your email platforms up to send to different groups of people by how much money they donate to you, what interests they have, which events they've come to, which things they've been involved with you before on, people who live in different areas of the country, people who are long-term supporters, people who have only just got to know you. And it's a brilliant way to treat people differently and make people feel special, as it were, make people feel that they are an individual and that you care about them and that you care about their preferences. And you can then use that knowledge that you've gained from what they've done with the emails that you've sent them to do things in the future. If you send out different types of content, don't assume that people want all of it. That's really, really important. We are currently giving people 4 different options for email when they sign up. They can opt into email, but we're asking them whether they'd like to get emails which are focused on prayer, emergency appeals, news and updates, which is kind of your, the general things that we send out to people, and opportunities to give, which are our appeals. And it's really interesting to see which combinations of boxes people tick in that regard. And it does mean that people, because some people obviously don't want to receive requests for money, for example, really important that they're able to tell us that that's the case and that they only want to get news and updates. Content trying to appeal to everybody doesn't actually work as well, so you're better off breaking things down, appealing to your separate audiences, rather than trying to send out, one email that covers all bases. think this is such an important, thing to think about. When we first started overhauling our communication as an organisation, there was a lot of resistance internally to what we were doing, actually. There was worry that our long-term supporters, who were of an older generation in general, supported us for a long time, were very used to a particular style of communication, that they would feel harassed, bombarded, upset by the way that things had changed in terms of what we were sending out. And people were worried that we were going to have to field loads of complaints from, angry supporters that we'd changed the way we were communicating with them. And that actually wasn't the case. I'm not saying we didn't get anybody complain, but it was very, very minimal. And it just showed that it doesn't actually often make the difference, in terms of people's attitudes that you think it will. A word as well, that sending more than one email a quarter is not bombarding people. I think it has been proven that when people don't hear from organisations, don't hear from anybody that they've signed up to, they slowly forget about who they've signed up to get emails from. They forget about you and your cause and what you're trying to tell them. They become less familiar with you. More is actually good. I'm not saying daily emails, unless people have specifically signed up for them, which they might have done. But when people don't hear from you, they do forget about you. From the quarterly e-newsletter in 2012, that's 4 emails. We sent 65 emails last year. Many were similar emails sent to different segments of supporters, so your same email, different sender even. But going from 4 to 65 emails in 5 years, and they are performing better than they were in 2012. It's so important not to be scared of sending more. Another word on sending more. It does improve the response that you get. 3 years ago, we did a major campaign that was match funded by DFID. So, every £1 that supporters gave to our appeal was matched by the UK government, which was an amazing opportunity. And we decided we were going to really make people aware that this was there was a time limit on this. When you do a match-funded appeal with DFID, there's a time frame of 3 months that you can run it. And so we decided right near the end we were going to start ramping up the emails, saying to people, you haven't got long left to participate in this. Please be aware. And so we sent out an email with 7 days to go of the appeal. We sent out one with 48 hours to go to people who'd already given to the appeal, just making them aware that it was due to end. And we sent out one to people slightly different, to people who hadn't given, giving them the opportunity, saying there really are just 2 days to go. That graph shows the course of the 3-month campaign. You can see there's a big peak early on, which was when we did the initial push. But then at the end, you can see how the responses to the campaign, the donations, were ramping up and up. And we had the highest number of donations on the final day of the campaign. And that happened because we had reminded people that they didn't have long left to act. And that doesn't even have to, just work for an emergency appeal. If you want people to sign up to something, if you want people to get their bookings in for your church weekend away, you can keep reminding them, telling them, you've not got long now, you need to do this. And people will respond. Don't be scared of doing it. Urgency is what works. And incidentally, that year, the year we ran that appeal, we'd gone from online donations being 2% of total to 10% that year. That was in 3 years. And it just shows the difference you can make by overhauling your emails and communicating with people more effectively. One thing, don't be afraid to apologise to people when you get it wrong. I talked earlier about the airline and the flight to Moscow. I think we probably all know that when we get an email in our inbox which says, oh, sorry, or we got something wrong, we rush to open it because we want to know what it was, even if we weren't aware of it before. And they do have high open rates. I think we made a mistake in my office with an email a few years ago, and there was panic. There was panic in the office because it was the first time anything like that had happened, and there was worry from some quarters just how much upset we were going to have caused. We didn't do anything particularly bad, by the way. We just sent out an incorrect email. So we sent out an apology email, and nothing bad happened. People read these things, they accept them, they understand that in the digital world, things go wrong, links don't work, sometimes an email goes out to the wrong people, and it's okay if you own up to it. And don't make too much of a big deal of it. Of course, if you are having to send out apology emails every week, this might be something to work on. But the occasional one isn't the end of the world, and I would just say it's really not something to panic about if you've slipped up. There's 4 scary letters, which I'm just going to say a quick little word on at the end. I've been really fortunate. I've been off on maternity leave for most of this year, and I got to avoid GDPR-mageddon for the most part, being involved in it. But obviously, now I'm back, I'm very much immersed. And if you've been sending out emails this year, you will know that this is something you've had to really keep abreast of and be compliant with. Otherwise, there are penalties. And if you're new to engaging through email, you do need to make sure that you're not doing things you shouldn't. And one of the key things is that you must have a record of your subscribers' consent. At the beginning, when I said that we were sending emails out to 3,000 people in 2009, that was because they told us they had an email address. You're not allowed to do that anymore. Absolutely not allowed. People must give explicit consent for you emailing them, and you must have a record of that consent. So it's about best practice in opt-in pages, as well as telling people that they must explicitly opt in to getting things from you. It's a really good idea to tell them exactly what you will be sending them as a result of them ticking a box or ticking boxes. And the other key thing is to give them a clear way out. That will usually, of course, come as the form of an unsubscribe link at the bottom of an email. It's really important that when people unsubscribe from your emails, they do actually unsubscribe. It should be easy. You know, email platforms, they should unsubscribe people. I have unsubscribed from things, from organizations, and still keep getting emails. And you think, what's going on? It's something to really take notice of. When people unsubscribe, are they actually unsubscribing? Is there any way that they would somehow be getting emails? Sometimes, you know, little problems happen, but they can usually be easily rectified. But this is one thing that we really can't afford to mess up on anymore with how things have changed with GDPR. I think, as a final word, I think what I just want to say of all I've shared is that learning about communicating effectively through email, it's a really big learning curve, and I think no matter what stage you're at with communicating with people through email, you can find ways of how you can improve, how you can up your engagement, how things can get better. And so if you're really new to all this kind of stuff and thinking, oh, this is all really new information, kind of worried about what we're sending people, don't feel disheartened. There is so much information out there online about optimizing email content and, you know, making it better. It's easy to come across, and training on that front is easy to come across as well. If you've got budget for training, it may depend on, you know, your organization or employer. I can recommend who I did my training with, done several courses with a woman called Rachel, who runs a consultancy called the Donor Whisperer. You can Google donorwhisperer.co.uk, etc. She runs a course called How to Write Emails That Get a Response, and it's brilliant. It's a day-long intensive course, which you will learn so much from. If you have not got budget for training, you know, there are so many free resources online. I often go to Charity Comms for a lot of brilliant resources on email communication. Again, easily searchable, but there is just such a wealth of stuff out there. And I think that's it. So thank you. you.